Today, I've got an important update about the B36TC Bonanza that crashed on takeoff, just after takeoff, at North Perry Airport in Pembroke Pines, Florida. So stick with us on Flywire. Hey, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on Flywire, I've got an update for the B36TC 236 Bravo Charlie that crashed right after takeoff from runway 10 left at North Perry Airport, Pembroke Pines, Florida. We did a video on it last week, and there was some stuff that I couldn't say that has just come out in the FAA's preliminary report. So we're going to talk about that real quick, and some pretty interesting stuff. First of all is the airplane, and this is what I found otherwise, not in the prelim, but the airplane was actually spent most of its life in South Africa. And I got a picture of it there when it was there, and it was for sale locally. And apparently an interested buyer did go and look at it and did a pre-buy because the asking price was really low, 350 hours on the airplane, etc. So he went and did a pre-buy on it, and he reported that he did not buy the airplane because of rust that he found in the cylinders during a borescope inspection, plus something else that he didn't share. Apparently, the airplane was crated and then shipped to the United States, where it was given new paint and interior, and then registered as 236 Bravo Charlie. It's unknown to me at this point whether or not the seller in South Africa did that and shipped it here, got it registered on the U.S. registry, or the new owner, the fellows who bought it, did that. But filling in the blanks, it looks like the person that owned it here in the United States had bought it from there, imported it, and then fixed it up with intent to sell it, because the fellow who listed the airplane for sale and his business partner were the ones aboard the airplane, and they're the ones who died during the crash. Just a reminder, it flew less than 10 years, or in the last 10 years, it flew less than 5 hours a year after a top overhaul. So overall 310 hours and 15 years, and then hardly flying at all, shipped over here, and here we go. Before we get into the NTSB's section of the report, I want to tell you that I computed the book told on it, and for Bonanzas, and particularly the A36 and B36, the book numbers are pretty optimistic, and most people that fly these airplanes realize that. In general, the book numbers say the takeoff roll would have been about 1,000 feet, and to clear a 50-foot obstacle, you would need 2,100 feet. The VY climb would have been 95 knots. The takeoff runway available is 3,241 feet on 10 left. The Excel stop distance was in the neighborhood, according to the book, at about 2,400 feet. So the runway was well within its capabilities. However, I'm here to tell you that turbocharged airplanes, in particular the B36, they don't, well, none of them I know of make book number. So I would say more realistic takeoff roll is probably in the neighborhood of 1,500 feet or better for the given day, the weather in the given day. And to clear an obstacle, you'd need 3,150 feet, and which means that just past the end of the runway, he was maybe 50 to 100 feet in the air. And that actually corroborates with what a witness said. I'll get into that in just a second. And a better speed would have been 120 knots as a cruise climb, which means the takeoff runway required for this whole thing would have been in the neighborhood of about 4,800 feet. Okay, the Excel stop distance is about 3,600 feet. And that's much shorter, much longer than the actual runway available in this case. So just a quick rundown of the weather that was existent there at North Perry. HWO is the identifier, and It was daytime, about 3 in the afternoon, and temperatures were about 27 C, 10 knots, 100, 10 knots, visibility is 10 miles. Nice clear day, essentially 3012 on the altimeter. The lowest clouds were few, just very, very scattered at 3,900 AGL. So it was a nice day for flying. And according to the NTSB's report, the preliminary report, they said that a witness at HWO, and just as an aside here, when I did the first video, quite often when I do accident reviews, people contact me and tell me to fill in information about the accident from either a personal level or some that they know or somebody they know, and they give me more detail. But the problem is I can't say that. I can't put that on a YouTube video and tell you this is what happened. I don't really speculate. I just talk about the facts. And frankly, my perspective of doing an accident review is not so much to find out the nitty-gritty of how this accident happened, than to look at the broad brush strokes of what happened in the accident and then how the pilot and or crew reacted. Did they do the right thing? Is there something better that they could have done? What other options did they have? Stuff like that. It's a learning lesson from my perspective. So we can learn from this accident, which didn't turn out well. So if we're confronted with the same thing, then we hopefully can do better in that situation. That's my perspective when I do an accident review. And when I do that, I just can't speculate. So somebody did tell me what I'm going to read you here in the NTSB report. As it says, a witness at HWO reported that he heard an engine run-up being performed near taxiway Bravo before the airplane's departure. He stated that the engine was sputtering like rough idle. He heard cycling of the propeller a few times, and the engine backfired when power was increased during each sequence. He further reported that the engine RPM sounded high, very high, from low to full RPM repeatedly, which was more than a normal run-up, and he was doing it very fast. But this witness did not observe the takeoff. And whether a lot of people, I think, have speculated whether this guy's a credible witness, I think very likely is. If he's at the airport, he's heard airplanes do run-ups, and you get used to, even if he's not a pilot, you get used to the pattern of what they are. And when it's different, it attracts your attention. And rough running and backfiring is definitely one of those situations where it is not a normal pattern. I think I said it in the previous video that there were no other radio communications from the crew of this airplane, just the tower controller cleared from takeoff, and then then he closed the runway, and that's it for the ATC video. So the next paragraph, and there's not an awful lot in this preliminary report, but there's some important information. One is that observation of the run-up, and the next is a pilot-rated witness who saw the takeoff and then witnessed most of the subsequent accident from a distance, actually. So I figured out that where he was 775 feet at a bearing of 307 degrees from the departure end of runway 10 left, okay, which puts him roughly 4,000-ish, 4,500 feet from the accident itself, okay? And he's about 70 degrees off axis, and the airplane's going away from him. So that's where this guy was located. He observed the airplane in a very low climb at a very slow rate. That's a quote. He attributed the takeoff to be a soft field takeoff. One aside here is that the B36TC, if you remember from my first video, is that this airplane has a barren wing, which has more fuel in it. It's got it's a larger wing area, etc. But the tail isn't any different. And it's an A36 that was developed to the A36TC with the addition of that turbocharged engine. Same turbocharged engine, different wing, different flight controls, and now it's a B36TC at a higher gross weight. The point is that the tail was not changed, and it's not and here's the interesting thing about this wing is there isn't short and soft field in a B-36. The reason is the wing, because the wing will get you airborne before you have rudder authority to counter yaw or to help you with roll in that case. So that is an issue in that airplane. I have a friend who actually attempted to take off in a B-36 that did it too early and didn't realize that was an issue. Unfortunately, he did not have a good checkout in the airplane. But that's also an issue in Barons. The airplane wants to fly well below VMC, and that's not a good thing on the good bad scale. That's bad. So here we go. This guy attributed the takeoff to be a soft field takeoff. If the pilot was doing that with a rough running engine, then it was not good at all. So the witness goes on to say, diverted his attention when he heard the airplane suddenly experience a total loss of engine power, adding that it failed completely. At that time, the airplane was about 100, 200 feet past the departure into the runway. And frankly, I don't see how he can actually judge that, being nearly 4,500 feet from the departure, 4,000-ish feet from the departure into the runway. It's going to be pretty hard to determine that. You could just say that he was beyond that, beyond the departure in. And he did say that he was definitely lower than 300 feet. And I think that's credible to say, for him to judge what his altitude, his relative altitude was. And he said he was definitely lower, this quote, than 300 feet above ground level. The airplane remained at the same attitude for 1 to 2 seconds, and then started a gentle right bank while maintaining the same pitch attitude. And then the airplane stalled, that's a quote, and pitched nose down. He heard a loud bang and noted an explosion. Okay, I think you can say that what happened is the engine quit, and the pilot says, "Oh shit, I got to turn back to the runway," after a startle effect. 1 to 2 seconds, that's actually pretty fast. Startle effect generally is around 3 to 5 seconds. So you can say that this happened pretty fast for him to make the decision to then turn back towards the runway. We know now that that was not a good plan. It was not a good plan, frankly, at 300 feet at any time, unless you're flying a really low wing loaded airplane. But an airplane like a Bonanza or a A36, B36 in particular, that is just not a good decision to try to make it back to a runway, even the opposite runway, or the parallel. So we know from the previous video, after having watched that ring camera video, that the airplane stalled in a steep right bank and then impacted the ground, followed by that SUV spinning around, rotating to the right, and ending up in the airport fence backwards, and the fire starting at that point. There have been some reports that the airplane was in a right bank before that engine quit. They weren't included on the NTSB prelim, and I'm not sure that I would place a lot of credibility in that somebody, especially off axis, 90 degrees off axis from that, would really have a tough time being able to determine just when the turn started in relation to the engine quitting. But this guy, this particular witness, was basically behind him, 70 degrees off axis, but and behind him, pretty good distance. So he was in position to hear the engine and then see the airplane turn. And I think I'd say that was a very credible position, and to witness exactly and relate what happened during the event. So there we have it. That's the update for us today. I think what's important to take away from this, and remember, my perspective is how do we learn? How can we glean things that will make us better pilots, safer pilots in the future? And what I think is important here is that if there's something wrong with the engine, and frankly, from my perspective, given this engine's history, I would suspect it from the get-go that it's likely to have a problem. And So I would say that if there's anything wrong at all, take it back to the hangar and let's figure it out on the ground. There's some other problem. So from a speculator's point of view, you would think that this guy was trying to sell it, and he sure didn't want the engine to be the bad thing. So he was going to, I don't know, was he going to blow it out in the air? You know, I don't really, it's hard for me to get my arms around that. So I can't say that's what happened. I don't know the guy. I don't know his situation at all. But what I think we can learn as pilots is if you have any problem at all during the engine run-up, and it's always a good idea to do one, if it's not operating normally, don't go, stop, figure it out. What is the problem? And it's always better to take a delay, whether it's a few minutes or days, maybe even in a case where you need to change the engine, you know, a couple of months. But it's always better to do that than to find yourself at 300 feet and fully stalled, trying to make it back to a runway you're not going to. So anyway, I thought this was a pretty important update, and the reason why is because I had information about this, but I couldn't talk about it. And now that the FAA preliminary report has it, I think it's more official. It's not coming from me, but it's coming from the FAA the NTSB, and they're pretty serious about that. They do have a serious approach to this, and I appreciate that, and doing the investigation. So I just wanted to share that with you. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you next time on Flywire. Click this link for the latest upload. Click this link for whatever YouTube thinks you ought to watch. Or you can click this link to subscribe. Thanks for watching.